For years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were the couple that gave Hollywood hope. In an industry where marriages rarely lasted more than a handful of years, they seemed untouchable. Nearly 2 decades together, 2 beautiful daughters, glamorous red carpet appearances, and a reputation for staying away from the chaos of Hollywood scandals. To the outside world, theirs was the kind of love story that made people believe in second chances. That's why, when the headlines hit in late September 2025, fans couldn't believe it. Nicole Kidman had officially filed for divorce from Keith Urban, bringing a sudden end to a marriage that had lasted 19 years. The filing came just 1 day after reports broke that they had separated, and according to insiders, the move left Kidman devastated. Sources close to the actress claimed she never wanted this split, that she was fighting to save the marriage until the very last moment. But Keith? Reports suggested he had already emotionally checked out. Friends claimed he was living separately months before the news broke, while Nicole was still desperately trying to keep the family together. Fans rushed to social media, stunned by the news. Some blamed Keith for walking away. Others speculated that Nicole's ambitious career and busy schedule played a role. But one thing was clear. The picture-perfect couple wasn't as flawless as the world had believed. And maybe, just maybe, the signs were always there, because the truth is, their story was never a smooth fairy tale romance. Behind the red carpets, award shows, and public declarations of love were hidden struggles, addiction battles, embarrassing public moments, and rumors that haunted them for years. So how did Hollywood's golden couple go from a whirlwind romance and vows of forever to one of the most shocking divorces of the decade? Let's start at the very beginning. It all started in January 2005, at a glamorous event in Los Angeles called the Jade USA Gala, an annual celebration of Australians in America. Nicole Kidman was already a global superstar at this point, an Oscar-winning actress, a fashion icon, and one of the most admired women in the industry. Keith Urban, though already a well-known country singer in Nashville, was still climbing his way toward mainstream fame. When Nicole spotted Keith, she felt something. Later, she admitted she had a crush the first time she saw him, but surprisingly, Keith didn't act on it right away. In fact, after that first meeting, he didn't call her for 4 whole months. Nicole has joked in interviews that she thought he just wasn't interested. "I was like, what a shame. I really liked him," she recalled. But when he finally did reach out, everything changed. Keith made his grand gesture in the most romantic way. On Nicole's 38th birthday, he showed up at her house at 5 a.m. with a garden full of flowers. That was the moment Nicole said she knew. This is the man I'm going to marry. Their whirlwind romance moved quickly, and by June 2006, just over a year after meeting, they tied the knot in a dreamy ceremony in Sydney, Australia. The wedding was extravagant, yet deeply personal, with family, close friends, and a candlelit atmosphere that screamed timeless romance. The photos were splashed across magazines worldwide, Nicole stunning in her Balenciaga gown, and Keith, handsome and emotional, as he watched his bride walk down the aisle. They looked like the ultimate match, the elegant movie star and the rugged country singer, a Hollywood meets Nashville fairy tale. But as perfect as it all seemed, the cracks appeared almost immediately. Just 4 months after their wedding, Nicole found herself in a situation no newlywed dreams of. Keith's long struggle with addiction, something he had battled for years before they met, came crashing back. In October 2006, he checked himself into rehab. Nicole later admitted she had staged a sort of intervention, recognizing that her husband's career and life were in danger if he didn't get help. For Nicole, who had already endured the highly publicized collapse of her first marriage to Tom Cruise, this was another test of resilience, and unlike her first marriage, she was determined to fight for this one. Keith later opened up about that dark time, admitting that Nicole had saved him. "She really is the one who helped me get sober," he told interviewers years later. "I was spiritually awoken with her." But those early struggles weren't easy. Imagine being a newlywed, expecting to enjoy the honeymoon phase of your marriage, and instead spending those first months trying to help your partner survive. Nicole stood by him, visiting him at rehab, supporting him quietly behind the scenes, and refusing to give up. And for a while, it worked. Keith came out stronger, throwing himself into music, and Nicole became his anchor. Fans admired her loyalty, calling her the definition of a devoted wife. Hollywood reporters praised their bond, saying they had already been tested in fire and come out stronger. By the late 2000s, the couple seemed to be thriving again. Keith's career was booming with hit singles and sold-out tours, while Nicole was balancing blockbuster movies with more personal projects. They appeared on red carpets hand in hand, smiling, laughing, and giving the world the impression that their love had conquered everything. But if there's one thing we've learned about Hollywood relationships, it's this. The story you see in glossy magazine covers and award show appearances is rarely the full story. Because while Keith was staying sober and Nicole was balancing family and career, new challenges were already brewing, ones that would quietly chip away at their marriage for years to come. After Keith's rehab and Nicole's unwavering support, it seemed like the couple had made it through the hardest storm. By 2008, they were ready to expand their family. That year, Nicole gave birth to their first daughter, Sunday Rose. 2 years later, in 2010, their second daughter, Faith Margaret, was born via surrogate. The couple made a very deliberate choice. Instead of raising their children under the blinding Hollywood spotlight, they settled in Nashville, Tennessee. For Nicole, who had spent decades in Los Angeles and New York, Nashville offered a quiet escape. And for Keith, it was home. He thrived in the country music hub, surrounded by his craft and free from the pressures of Hollywood gossip columns. Their family life in Nashville seemed idyllic. Interviews painted a picture of playdates, school runs, and home-cooked dinners. Nicole often said she loved the anonymity Nashville gave her. She could attend her kids' soccer games or pick up groceries without being mobbed by paparazzi. Keith, meanwhile, credited Nicole with helping him stay grounded, reminding him what truly mattered when the fame and success threatened to overwhelm. For years, they managed what many Hollywood couples couldn't, a balance between work and family. Nicole carefully selected her projects, sometimes stepping back from filming to focus on her daughters. Keith, despite his demanding tour schedule, was often photographed flying back home between shows just to spend a few days with the family. Fans saw them as proof that love could survive in Hollywood if you put family first. They were nicknamed the Nashville Royals, a power couple who lived humbly despite their combined fame and fortune. But even in that picturesque life, whispers began to surface. Some said Nicole still longed for the thrill of Los Angeles and New York, while Keith preferred the quieter rhythm of Tennessee. Others suggested that while Nicole was willing to slow her career for the family, Keith often wasn't willing to compromise. At first, those whispers were easy to ignore, but they weren't going away. For all their efforts to stay private, rumors followed Nicole and Keith like shadows. One of the earliest signs of tension came from the very thing that had bonded them in the beginning: Keith's career. As he dominated country music charts and went on extensive tours, whispers started that Nicole felt left behind. In 2011, tabloids began reporting that the couple was struggling with distance. Keith was on the road more than he was home, and Nicole, often filming in far-off locations, was raising the kids largely on her own. Insiders claimed Nicole wanted him to slow down, to be more present, while Keith believed that constant work was part of maintaining his sobriety and sanity. Then came the embarrassing public comments. Over the years, Keith made headlines for oversharing details about their marriage. In one particularly notorious interview, he described Nicole as a maniac in bed. While the quote was meant to be playful, it became tabloid fodder for weeks, with critics saying it was inappropriate and disrespectful to share such personal details. Nicole reportedly brushed it off, but fans couldn't help wondering if she was as amused as Keith was. Another rumor that refused to die was that Nicole still carried scars from her high-profile divorce from Tom Cruise. Some insiders claimed she was more guarded, more hesitant to fully let her guard down, even with Keith. In contrast, Keith was known to be deeply emotional and sensitive, something that could create friction when their communication styles clashed. Through it all, the couple continued projecting an image of unity. Red carpet appearances, romantic tributes in interviews, and family outings were staged reminders that they were still strong. But even their public declarations of love started to look more performative to some fans. "Why do they always overdo it on the red carpet?" one critic asked. "It almost feels like they're trying to convince us, or themselves." By the mid-2010s, the cracks were becoming harder to ignore. And yet, every time rumors swirled, they doubled down on the public displays of affection, which leads us to the paradox that defined much of their marriage: the glamorous couple that looked perfect to the world. But insiders kept insisting all was not well. On the red carpet, Nicole and Keith were dazzling. From the Academy Awards to the Met Gala, they were photographed kissing, holding hands, and whispering to each other like newlyweds. They had a way of making their love look timeless, the kind of romance you only saw in movies. But behind the curtain, insiders noticed the subtle signs of distance. At certain events, Nicole seemed tense, while Keith appeared more carefree. Some friends described it as two people in very different worlds who were trying to make it look seamless. The most striking example came in 2023. Keith was performing in Las Vegas, and during one of his shows, he surprised fans by playing a montage of personal wedding footage, clips from their 2006 ceremony in Sydney. The crowd went wild, cheering for their fairy tale love story. But according to sources close to Nicole, she wasn't entirely thrilled. Some said she felt uncomfortable that something so personal was turned into a stage performance. By late 2024, the gossip got louder. Rumors spread that Keith had quietly rented a separate place in Nashville, fueling speculation that he needed space. Fans noticed that Nicole was attending more events alone, while Keith focused on his tours and recording sessions. Still, whenever cameras were around, they turned on the charm. They smiled, laughed, and kissed for the photographers, determined to maintain the image of the perfect Hollywood couple. But fans on social media began to call it out, posting side-by-side comparisons of older, more genuine moments against their newer, more polished appearances. The difference was clear. Something had changed. And as the world would soon learn, those cracks weren't just rumors anymore. They were warnings of a marriage reaching its breaking point. By 2024, the once rock-solid marriage of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban was beginning to visibly unravel. What had once been just whispers in tabloids was now being echoed by people close to them. One of the first noticeable shifts was how often Nicole was appearing solo. At the 2024 Golden Globes, she arrived without Keith, despite being nominated for Expats, a role that had drawn rave reviews. Fans quickly pointed it out on social media. "Where's Keith?" trended briefly on X, formerly known as Twitter. Keith, meanwhile, was spotted performing in Texas that same week. Behind the scenes, sources claimed Nicole had been urging Keith to slow down his touring and spend more time with the family. But Keith, ever the workhorse, wasn't willing to step away from music. He reportedly believed that his career kept him steady, that the rhythm of touring was part of what protected his sobriety. Nicole, however, felt increasingly isolated, raising their teenage daughters largely on her own. Money wasn't the issue. Both stars had thriving careers and a combined fortune in the hundreds of millions. But as one insider put it, Nicole wanted a partner at home. Keith wanted to be out on the road. They loved each other, but they weren't living the same life anymore. Adding fuel to the fire were rumors of Keith getting a little too comfortable on the road. Paparazzi snapped photos of him laughing and hanging close with younger musicians and female crew members. While nothing ever proved romantic, the optics didn't sit well with Nicole. "She's old school," said one friend. "When she commits, she commits." Seeing Keith surrounded by that lifestyle again triggered old fears. The final straw may have been the emotional distance. Nicole had told People magazine in early 2024 that she still considered Keith my love, my deep, deep love. But insiders revealed she had been fighting to save the marriage for months, while Keith seemed to be pulling away. The breaking point came in mid-2025. Multiple reports suggest that Keith had moved out temporarily, renting his own place in Nashville. To outsiders, it looked like just space. But to those close to the couple, it was a sign the marriage was nearing its end. One exclusive source told People magazine that the writing was on the wall once Keith got his own home. It wasn't framed as an affair or a dramatic betrayal, but rather as a quiet admission that they were living separate lives. Still, Nicole didn't want to give up. Her sister Antonia, who has always been her closest confidant, reportedly encouraged her to keep fighting. Friends said Nicole believed their nearly 20 years together was worth salvaging. She leaned heavily on her family during this time, flying back to Australia for emotional support. But Keith, according to insiders, had already made up his mind. He was described as checked out emotionally. One source claimed Nicole was still trying. Keith wasn't. That imbalance became impossible to ignore. On September 29, 2025, People broke the story that Nicole and Keith had separated. Just one day later, Nicole officially filed for divorce in Nashville, citing irreconcilable differences. The speed was shocking. For fans, it felt like a sudden collapse of a love story that had seemed so enduring. But for those behind the scenes, the separation had been slowly unfolding for years. The fallout was immediate and dramatic. Nicole's filing painted her as the one left heartbroken. Reports claimed she didn't want this and had hoped Keith would recommit. Sources close to her said she felt very betrayed, particularly by how quickly Keith seemed ready to move on. Within days of the announcement, speculation about custody, assets, and their massive real estate portfolio began to dominate headlines. Together, they owned multi-million-dollar properties in Nashville, Beverly Hills, Australia, and New York. Dividing them would be complicated, but the biggest shock was Keith's demeanor. According to multiple reports, he was already smiling, performing, and moving forward, while Nicole was leaning on her family and appearing visibly shaken. One insider said, "It seems like he's already moved on." And that's the hardest part for Nicole. She fought for this marriage. He didn't. Fans were divided. Some took Nicole's side, saying Keith had taken her love for granted. Others argued that Nicole knew what life with a touring musician would be like, and that perhaps she demanded too much. The media frenzy was relentless. Every move, every Instagram post, every sighting, every red carpet appearance was dissected. Their daughters, Sunday and Faith, were suddenly thrust into the public eye, with tabloids speculating about custody arrangements and how the split would affect them. For Hollywood, it was more than just another celebrity breakup. This was a love story nearly 2 decades in the making. A marriage that had been seen as proof that fame didn't always have to ruin relationships. And now, it was over. When the news broke that Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were officially over, it felt like the end of an era. For nearly 2 decades, they had been Hollywood's golden couple, balancing red carpets with real life, glamorous premieres with Sunday family dinners. Their story was proof, at least for a while, that love could survive the spotlight. But as the dust settled, people began asking, what is their legacy, and what happens now? For Nicole, the divorce represents both heartbreak and a new chapter. She's been through this before. Her split with Tom Cruise in 2001 was one of the most publicized divorces in Hollywood history. Back then, she rebuilt her life, focusing on her career and eventually finding Keith. Today, she faces another reinvention. Friends say Nicole is leaning on her daughters, Sunday and Faith, and her sister Antonia. Work will likely be her anchor. With expats earning praise and multiple film projects on the horizon, Nicole is still one of the most in-demand actresses in the world. There's even talk of her returning to stage theater in London, something she's always wanted to revisit. Professionally, she's as unstoppable as ever, but emotionally, the loss is heavier. As one insider put it, Nicole gave this marriage everything she had. She didn't want it to end. That will take time to heal. For Keith, the path looks very different. Unlike Nicole, who thrives in film and prestige projects, Keith's life has always been defined by the road. And if the last few months are any indication, he's doubling down on it. His 2026 world tour has already been announced, and ticket sales are booming. Fans are eager to see if his new music will reflect the heartbreak of divorce, much like his earlier work mirrored his struggles with addiction. Some speculate this split could inspire the most vulnerable, powerful songs of his career. Others worry that the freedom of being single again could pull him back into dangerous patterns. So far, Keith has remained upbeat, telling audiences at a recent show, "Music is what keeps me steady. Always has, always will." But the larger story is what their breakup says about love in the spotlight. They had money, fame, beauty, and history. And still, it wasn't enough. Their split has already sparked endless debates online. Can any Hollywood marriage truly last? Did fame tear them apart, or was it simply time? Fans are divided, but emotional. "If Nicole and Keith couldn't make it work, who can?" one comment read. Another said, "At least they had 19 good years. That's more than most people get." And maybe that's their real legacy. Not the divorce, but the years they shared. Nearly 20 years of raising children, supporting each other's careers, and building a family against the odds. For almost 2 decades, they proved that even in the chaotic world of Hollywood, true connection was possible. As for what's next, only time will tell. Nicole will likely emerge, as she always has, with grace and strength. Keith will channel his emotions into his music as he's always done. They may no longer be together, but their love story, the highs and the heartbreak, will remain one of Hollywood's most unforgettable chapters. In the end, the divorce doesn't erase the story they wrote together. It simply closes it. And for millions of fans who watched them over the years, it's a bittersweet reminder that even the strongest bonds can bend, and sometimes they break.